And everybody, welcome to our Making Connections, Exploring Local Data Sources, the MISchoolData and MICIP for my continuous improvement session. That was a mouthful. I'm Dr. Jennifer Parker, and I am very excited today to be joined by Deanne Spencer, our facilitator of school improvement at Macomb ISD, and my partner in the MISchoolData project, Dr. Rhonda Provost. Today's webinar, you can join us on the tiny URL if you'd like to join us on the slide deck. Today is going to be recorded and you will have an opportunity to view the session after we are done. Today's materials are a part of a larger project. It is part of our MICIP project, and a lot of the materials that you're going to see today are out there freely available through your ISD. Our learning objectives for today are to understand how MISchoolData and MICIP connect. Today is going to be a very, very quick lightning speed round version. We're going to take you on a quick tour of the MISchoolData portal as well as the MICIP system about how those integrate. At the end of the broadcast, we will stop the recording and be able to take a couple of questions. But however, some of the things you need to know is that a lot of the questions you're going to ask may have to do with your own local district implementation, and we may not have an answer for you. But we are willing to connect you to the folks that do. So if after today's broadcast questions, feel free to email us. So we are going to look at the MISchoolData resources in the MICIP system. We're going to look at the two systems. We'll look at how they connect to each other. We're going to look at some applications for continuous improvement. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how you move that into data-driven dialogue. There's a lot of out there surrounding both of these platforms. And one of the things that you may want to do is with today's materials, we're encouraging you to sit back, listen, reflect, think about how you can take some of the resources that we're sharing and the big ideas back to your own district. So vocabulary is one of the baseline items, such as SO, which means single sign-on. We'll be talking about secure users. We'll be talking about continuous improvement, data stories, and the platforms themselves. So if you're unfamiliar with some of these vocabulary terms, hang on to your hats, we will talk about them. Many of the initiatives that you'll hear about today, both of the platforms, have a lot of efforts and a lot of work behind the scenes. Notice that, or know that the MICIP system and the MISchoolData platform are both working together to try and align to many of the state initiatives out there. For example, the Top 10 Strategic Plan. Out of this work has come a lot of collaboration and a lot of conversations. For today's broadcast, the most important things that you need to understand is the difference between these data systems and how they work and work together. You need to understand what the data hub is and what it does, what the MISchoolData platform has, what your local data warehouse will provide, and how those connect to MICIP. These are four very different places and four very different features, as well as the way they connect to each other. So the Michigan Data Hub, one of the first things you need to understand is that this is a data exchange. They have standards that they move through, and what this is going to do is it's going to exchange your data. When you sign up for the data, it actually is a way for you to move data from one place to another. If you are interested in joining the Data Hub, you need to make sure you work with your intermediate school district and find out if that is the right fit for you. The MISchoolData system is where you are looking for your state data. You've got pre-K data all the way to college and career readiness data, workforce data. This is the state data portal. Anything that Center for Education Performance and Information can pull down and post, they have it in there in the MISchoolData portal. There's over 98,000 different reports, and there is all kinds of PK20 data. Your local data warehouse obviously is something like a Performance Matters or an Illuminate Ed, or maybe you're using DataWise or some of the other platforms that are out there. We used to have Data Director. These are the local data warehouses where you're holding your information. You may have your NWEA score, you might have your end of course assessment. Maybe you're looking at student information, your student information system into your local data warehouse. So whatever local data that you have in your warehouse or in your student information or data warehouse is accessible to you. That is another separate piece. Last, the MICIP process. So we look at the data exchange from the data hub, we look at MISchoolData, and we look at your local data resources. Those are all going to feed or inform the MICIP process. The MICIP is a mindset and a shift in thinking. So you'll be looking at continuous improvement. We'll be thinking about health. We'll be thinking about system thinking, and we're going to be adding into the mix the conversation about equity. All of these come together, pulling from those different data sets to inform your plan. There's a couple of different vocabulary terms that need to be identified, and you need to understand the difference. In MISchoolData, they both use the word data story in a different manner. In MISchoolData, a data story is the dashboard and education focus area. It has a very different look and feel in the MICIP system. It could be considered a data set or a data story. The education focus areas data really do tell a data story, and you're going to be pulling a lot of this information into your MICIP system. As you all know, the MICIP system went live in January, and you know the MISchoolData redesign went live in October of last year. Both of them are now live and fully functioning, ready to go, ready to be using. There are lots of connections across these systems. So when you come into the MISchoolData portal, you'll notice that you'll have access to many of the other systems that are out there, including MICIP. So by using this connections button, that'll show you what you have access to out there in the other systems. MICIP and MISchoolData will talk to each other. When you come into the MICIP system, you'll see that data comes in through what we call a pinhole or a peekaboo into another system. So when you come into MICIP, you will see remnants of the MISchoolData portal coming based on the inquiry. After today's broadcast, we're going to share with you a lot of resources. Things are evolving with these two platforms because they are constantly being updated and tweaked. You will note that there are two things that you may want to register to receive. One is our news and notes from MISchoolData. That is points for school leaders that come out every month. And you also may want to sign up to get the MICIP continuous communication, which that comes out on a regular basis. Both of these will provide you the most up-to-date information about both platforms. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the MISchoolData overview, and I think I will turn it over to Dr. Pro, who can take us into what's new in the portal. Dr. P?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to start with the overview. So some of this may be a review, but I know that with learning new information about the launch since October 2020, every time I hear it, I learn something more. And I also want to remind you that there's many ways to get to the data point. So if you have a favorite way already established, that may be your method, but I'm going to take you right from the menu driven to show you some examples. So again, the portal for MISchoolData is the state site. Dr. Parker talked to you about the individual capacities that are available within data warehouses at the local level, the data hub that's available. The MISchoolData is going to attract all of your state data for pre-K through workforce. You can also look at various levels of that data, whether it be as another school district, your own school district at an ISD level, post-secondary ed at the college level. And then all of this information comes into various different report formats that are required by local districts as part of the State Aid Act. So you're going to see reports that are available in graphs, trends. There's going to be snapshots. You can have downloadable reports or spreadsheets. And then how this is connecting to the state initiatives that Dr. Parker talked about. So where does the data come from? That data starts with the local school, this local school district. As you're looking at this webinar today, we are exploring the local data. So your local data goes to various levels once it leaves your schoolhouse. For example, any data that's related to drilled down to a student is available with the secure secure login with the MISchoolData portal. Information travels to CEPI. These acronyms here represent the various reports where that data is populated and then is shared at large. And then, of course, we have both sides of the users, public and secure, depending on what permissions and roles you hold in your school district. So Dr. Parker also mentioned about the connections, right from preschool, and really it starts at 0 to age 3. We have programs in our schoolhouse that offer programs to us, infants to 3-year-olds, and then it progresses up beyond post-secondary into the workforce area. So these are all connections that are made from data that leaves your schoolhouse. So now how do we connect? How do you get access to MISchoolData? Again, you have to have a permission or a role. There's a public site, which is probably about 95% of the data you can access from the public lens. And then there's the secure site, and that's based on your district, your building, what role or permission you hold. ISDs may have authorizations for local school districts that they represent and help with the school improvement process and accessing data. So everybody has a different level of responsibility when they have a secure user login. So how does that login work? Well, we had a migration process in the spring. Through the summer, we migrated about 80% of the accounts that were in the portal. Now as a user, you have to go through the My Login third party direct, and it'll allow you to set up a My third party account, and then you can access or get to the permissions for the MISchoolData portal. And again, that is managed. Those privileges are still managed at the ISD level. So first step in the process is the access and support. So you basically go in, you sign up as a new user, you create that My Login for third party, and then you have to request access. So for illustration purposes, Dr. Parker here is trying to obtain a login, and you can see that it comes up. She's got a third party login. Here's the home page. She wants to access MISchoolData. She will click that next. Step 2 in the process will then take you to your ISD, RESA, RESD, I think ESA is one of ESAs. It'll take you to that agency or institution that you will next have to complete a FERPA HIPAA compliance. You'll have to go through the quiz, and then from there, once you complete that, then your account will be activated for secure login purposes by your ISD contact. For purposes for today, that's just a snapshot of page 1, and we have links out to that in the webinar that you can access to know who the person is you need to contact to activate that account. They no longer reset passwords, they activate accounts. Next, we're going to move into the features and the navigation process. We're going to start with a really quick, nice handout that was created by CEPI. The link is at the bottom left hand of the screen, and it's basically just the home page. It's a quick overview. It gives you kind of like those call outs of what each menu represents in a very nice confined back-to-back 2-page document. I'd highly recommend that for new users or for trainings, this is a really good tool to use as you're getting acclimated to the new website and the platform. So looking at our menu at large, when we get to our home page, what's new? Dr. Parker talked about the menus with the connections, education map, support, and then login. That's all in that top area to the right of the home link. Underneath that is our menus that we will be using most frequently. And like I said, you are able to access these at different levels in the portal. It's what you have a comfort level with. So we're going to start with just going through dashboards and education focus areas. That is a new feature. Early childhood, K-12 grade is now, it encompasses special education. Student subgroups is a new part of the menu, post-secondary, and then workforce. So these are your menus, your main menus. Underneath that, you'll notice that we have identified the new personas. And personas are really that 30,000-foot view. It's been prepared for educators, parents, policymakers, and media. So it just kind of gives you that big lay of the land that you can access and get to a certain area really quickly, and what information would be applicable to that group. Next, we have with the navigation, we have, I just want to take you through the menu bars, the landing pages, and submenus. So for illustration purposes for this webinar, post-secondary has been the main menu. From there, when we pull down post-secondary, you're going to see to your left, post-secondary landing page. Underneath that are the submenus that are applicable to the post-secondary landing page. To your right, no matter what pull down menu you have or what main menu you have, you're going to always see what's most popular on the dashboard, what are the recent updates and what's upcoming. And notice that parent dashboard just always takes the first here. So that's the most popular access to the portal is the parent dashboard. You're also going to be able to see what's coming new and trending, especially when it's in terms of reports that will be uploaded to the portal with the data that you collect at the local level. Speaking a little more about the landing pages, so now we're going to share with you the early childhood one to kind of differentiate for you. This one gives you quick and easy access to the submenus and the subpages. So when I actually hover over that landing page, what I'm going to see is a snapshot of all of the links that are applicable to that particular pull down menu. So for early childhood, you'll see at a snapshot, it'll, at a larger scale, I have early childhood program participation, K-3 absenteeism, continuative services, and special ed. All of that will be right under when you pull down the main landing page. And then there's also one more with this if you have proper permission to enroll, and that would be access to the K-3 MSTEP data of children that were in state-funded preschool programs. Next, I'm going to move quickly to the persona landing pages. So when we go into the, as I mentioned, those are new. Those are the 30,000-foot view. Think of that. Some of the spotlighted items were for educators because this portal is really about educators. It's a lot of our educational data. This is our state source here. But what you're going to be able to see is what featured reports are available. What are those dashboards? There's the financial transparency dashboard, the education dashboard, and all of those reports that I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. All of those reports filter into these particular areas and produce data for you to use at the local level. So with those featured tools, what's trending now? You saw that a little bit in a previous menu. So you can see that you can get to areas in multiple ways. What are those featured dashboards? What are the connections? If you notice when you go down, you can see what reports are applicable to student enrollment. That may be of interest. What does our student enrollment look like? We may not have assessment data in the portal from 1920, but we certainly have a lot of other data that has been collected through the year. So these help keep users informed of all of those various reports that are, and the nice part about it is we're going to talk a little bit more about compare and contrast with reports, but a lot of what has been added to the redesign efforts. So when you go into a report, hover over, it'll tell you, what is this report about? This particular report is about post-secondary CTE awards by high school CTE status. It's going to show you the count and percent and whether they participated in a high school CTE program. So basically what you will do is you'll drop down the menus. It's going to allow you to change that inquiry setting. What year are you looking for? What location? What category? Then next you'll have what we call is a hamburger menu, and that allows you to print or download reports. And then you can also change your radar button, as Dr. Parker's pointing there. You can change your radar button, and then that'll give you a new selection. What other information would you like? And then you can also, as always, download tables as in spreadsheet formats. So those are still available in that type of a format. So Dr. Parker talked about that pinhole. I think of pinhole as historical data. So from the legacy site, we're calling the previous site of MISchoolData the legacy site. From that legacy site to the redesigned site, those reports have pinholed. They pinholed over. They pinholed over so you can use them still for MICIP. All of that transitioned in the redesign phase. So reports that you've had, maybe you were looking at 5-year trends, so you want to go back to 15-16 school year. That data is still available for you to access. And then a reminder that MICIP is pulling those reports through the pinhole method. Looking at the search feature, it allows you to locate and expand results. The search feature, there's about 98,000 reports in MISchoolData. So you can just imagine with the search feature, if you put in CTE, or if you type out career and technical education, or if you're interested in what's in that legislative dashboard, you can type it here and it will take you and provide you with all of those search opportunities that you have requested. And you can see that what results am I looking for? All? Do I want it by content? Do I want it by location? Once you get to the report level. And then your compare tool. This new feature allows you to compare schools, districts, and ISDs. You can compare up to 20 locations in the new redesign. And that can be in a variety of topics. So for example, what you would want to do is in the compare tool, you would want to set your location. What school year are you interested in? What metrics are you trying to pull from that? Are you looking at student count? Are you looking at schools of choice? Are you looking at MSTEP data? You know, like how did they do at 3rd grade reading level? All of that information is available by comparing locations up to 20 different ones. So you could be in different parts of the great state and still have data comparable information available. And then the education map, that again is on that top bar on the by the home button. That has been expanded now. As you can see, the first layer of the example for the education map is our great state. It has little graduation caps. Those are all the local districts, PSAs, ISDs represented in the state. And then for purposes of this webinar, we have pulled in one district called Jackson Public Schools. This particular webinar is related to how do I get to my local data? Well, just in an education map, by typing in Jackson, we were able to find Jackson Public Schools, the district code. Now look at what we're finding immediately, fast facts. What is the student count based on 1920? That data has been updated. What is the economically disadvantaged for this particular district? And you can see just at a snapshot, you have all of this information available immediately. You don't have to do edit report and search, and it's now available to you through that education map. And then in the support area, and please know that the help and support is another example of how you can, where you need to go next if you need help, obviously. There's also a nice quick reference, a glossary of terms that are available. And then evolving, as Dr. Parker mentioned, as we were transitioning, the professional development toolkit. We'll talk more about that when we conclude today, but just know that that particular area is evolving. As we have launched our platform in October, all of our courses and such are being migrated to the new redesigned portal. And so if you sign up for the talking points and some of those in the know communications that we have, you'll be able to keep up to date with what's being added to this area of the portal. And now I believe I'll turn it over to Dr. Jen.
All right, thanks, Dr. Provost. So knowing the audience that we have, we thought we would pull in some specific areas in the MISchoolData portal that your continuous improvement teams will probably want to see first of all, or have a tour of. So here are some hot spots in the MISchoolData portal that improvement folks like to visit. The first one is the dashboard. This is a 30,000 foot view of the website. or I'm sorry, of the dashboard and focus education focus areas are a 30,000 foot view of the district. So for example, when I hit any of these links, it'll take me right to that district. It'll take me to the parent dashboard information for that district at a glance. Really a lot of hyperlinks to give us a 30,000 foot view. Dr. Provost mentioned the compare tool. Our continuous improvement teams are often interested in comparing themselves to, say, other elementaries or other schools that are similar in demographics. So use that compare tool, dig in, and become it. Another resource our continuous improvement teams enjoy knowing about is the K-12 landing page, because I like to call this the Chinese buffet. This is all the hot links you might need in K-12 land right there for you to choose from. So the K-12 landing page is a great start for teams. When you navigate those landing pages, I know Dr. Provost talked a little bit about the landing pages and coming in through the menus and the sub-menus. We've given you a visual here in the slide deck. The K-12 sub-menus are also going to be common knowledge for you for most of your continuous improvement. They were using the legacy site. The K-12 is going to be very similar to what they would have seen, but you will notice, like Dr. Provost mentioned, the special ed is now part of that K-12 submenu. And please note that you need to click on the arrow to take you to the next section to pop up those submenus. But those submenus are very similar to the legacy site. You're going to be very familiar and it'll feel real comfortable for you. Again, the submenus and the location report settings, we did give you that example. One thing that I'll mention to you is these little carrots here are ways for you to compress and expand these inquiry boxes. So around with the little carrots to make sure that you're popping up and popping down the inquiry settings. Another spotlight on our MISchoolData for continuous improvement would be the new subgroup menu. You can hone in right down, filter right down to that subgroup. It's very helpful. It avoids a lot of clicks. So the subgroup, if you are interested in specific subgroups when you're talking continuous improvement. So that was a lightning speed round version of MISchoolData. How is that going to connect to MICIP? How are my continuous improvement teams going to connect the dots? How are we going to gather data out of either MISchoolData, local data warehouse, or come in through the data hub on that data highway? How are we going to connect everything? Your district will start by understanding what the logins are required for these two different platforms that we're really focusing on today. MISchoolData uses a MyLogin third-party account. That is what is used for your login on MISchoolData. MICIP uses a different login type. They're going to be using My Launchpad. Your district is going to be connecting using their single sign-on. So My Launchpad and My Login third party are two very different environments. It will be two systems that you'll be logged. In order to get into MICIP, your district needs to sign an agreement with the MICIP system. And that data hub, although it was originally communicated that you needed to be on the data hub and some of the different communications that went out, it is not required that data hub to get access to MICIP. However, if you are on the data hub, it will give you access to the data through your data exchange that the data hub provides for you. When you come into MICIP, notice this is not you're not logging in here to MISchoolData, or you're not using, when I come into MICIP to log in, I'm using what's called the My Launchpad. And we'll talk a little bit more about it, but when you come into My Launchpad, you'll be able to find your district and click to move in, to come in. Now, districts are going to want to coordinate their they're going to want to communicate, or they're going to want to coordinate who at the district is creating accounts in the MICIP system. It's going to be a totally different process than what you're used to in MISchoolData logins. They are using different systems, different logins, different platform. So our suggestion to you is to work with your intermediate school district, with the technology department there. to figure out who your contacts are, to figure out what district access you want to have, or either you're going in through the data hub or you're going in single sign-on. You're going to need to connect and install the My Launchpad, and you're going to also have to do that user management feature. And so handle your users and figure out who needs access. Our recommendation to you is definitely engage with your ISD, local districts and ISD contacts in technology to collaborate to support each other. With regards to MICIP, I'm going to give you a couple of overarching big ideas, and then I'm going to turn it over to our resident expert in improvement, Dee Spencer. If after today you have questions about MICIP, there are a lot of resources, including an overview video. There are links to professional learning. There are also links to the platform and the process guides. So the MICIP website is something you are definitely going to want to bookmark. They also have that e-newsletter that I mentioned previously that you will probably want to sign up for. They have them archived out on the website, so you can go back in time and see if you missed a memo. They are out there posted on the MICIP e-newsletter section. And again, there are also those resources from slide decks to videos, etc. I've mentioned to you previously that the My Launchpad is the way you're going to connect. In the slide deck, we've given you several clarifying conversations, several clarifying statements, so you can understand what the My Launchpad and each of the vocabulary terms mean. My Launchpad is the My Data Hub single sign-on system. It's the method all district users will use to get into MICIP. It'll eliminate the need for additional district accounts or passwords to manage. The district tech staff is the one that's going to administer those accounts. And then there are technical directions that are available out there using that system. With MISchoolData, MICIP, you are actually going to be using those pinhole reports. This integration is going to be used for the assessing needs piece of MICIP, the monitoring piece, as well as the evaluating improvement plans piece. And Dee is going to go into a little bit more detail about what that looks like and how those connect. The data hub will be connected in the fall for MICIP. Anything that you are seeing through the data hub, MyRead, etc., any of the features that are offered by the data hub will be able to be viewed, obviously, in the MICIP system through that piece. And then lastly, your local data warehouse. I know Dr. Provost mentioned that this is data. You obviously are going to be able to pull information from your local data warehouse and upload those as PDFs or static documents into the MICIP system. The MyStrategy Bank is relatively new on the scene, but the MyStrategy Bank has been populated with many improvement strategies, and throughout your there will be a system for pushing those strategies down and making them available for use. There is also a work in progress right now with each of your districts as well to have their own local strategies if they want to push those into the MICIP system and tag those. So the MyStrategy Bank, those are best practice strategies available for you to tag into your plan. MEGS and Nexus, that integration, we won't go deep into that today, but the Nexus system and the MICIP conversation is for a piece for further investigation. All right, this is a visual that will kind of give you a little bit of information about, many of us are visual learners and we want to know, well, all these systems that are out there, which do I use during what part of the process in MICIP, from access to assess needs, plan, monitor, and evaluate. And we've given you which piece of the system platform you will actually be pulling data from to use for that process. And you'll notice MISchoolData is used during assess needs, monitor, and evaluate, where the Michigan Data Hub is used during these pieces, as well as the My Launchpad and your local data warehouses, as well as the strategy bank. The strategy bank here is actually during the plan process. So this is a nice visual if you're looking for to know what platforms you're going to be using during what process. This is a nice visual. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Dee, who is going to dig us into the MICIP system.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Parker and Dr. Provost, for including me in your party here. So I'm going to kind of repeat a little bit about what Dr. Parker said and Dr. Provost said, but with just a different lens. So now we're going to come into this idea that we're entering into the MICIP system. So we are a district and we're going to be entering or creating a new goal area within the Michigan Integrated Continuous Improvement platform, and I'm entering the MICIP for the first time. So as Dr. Parker has already mentioned, that this is the launchpad screen. This is how we would enter to start working on our continuous improvement plan. So we would click on the My Launchpad and it would take us in. We sign in as we would through our district with our email. It's all set up through your technology department. Not much that many of us here in this room would have to worry about. It's generally taken care of by your technology people. So when you enter MICIP for the first time, there's two different screens. So this screen is what you would see once you've already gone through this process of creating a goal. You've actually established some of this work. So remember, when we're in MICIP, it's a very sequential process. So this is the look. You created a portfolio, you've started your work in here, and now you can see, you will see from a district lens the buildings that are under that big umbrella and whatever active goals you've already created. This is what you will see the first time you actually log in. So you've not initiated a plan. You've not gone through the process of the assess needs process, starting with assess needs, plan, implement, and monitor. So this would be how we would begin our work. So notice it says to start by discovering your data. So the assess needs process is actually where we start our continuous improvement process. And they've taken and given us some incremental steps and some narrative suggestions and boxes to capture the work as we move through. So within the new continuous improvement process, we have broken the assess needs process into 7 steps. Notice that those of us who are veterans of continuous improvement, that it's a little bit different look, but it's really not a different thought process. We're just focusing on an incremental and sequential way to look at thoughtful investigation and data-driven decision making. And our MISchoolData platform supports us throughout these steps. So as you move through the MICIP process, you're asked to reflect upon these different stages and capture the work as a team in correspondence to the stage that you're at. With Jen? So when we log into the MICIP platform, they've divided up the first part, which is assess needs, into 2 different components. The first being discovering data and the second being analyzing data. So when we go into discovering data, the first thing we have to decide, well, what is it we're going to actually invest our time in? So the consideration between academic, non-academic, or systems, there's not a singular focus on just looking at outcomes, student outcomes and test scores. What about the non-academics, culture, climate, or the systems by which we integrate things together? So this is a nice big change for our MICIP platform, really opening us up to really looking at that mindset where we talked about whole child and systems work. MICIP has created some templates for schools and districts to start them off. You can utilize any of their templates, whether it's academic, non-academic, or systems, as a launch pad, and then from there add your own pieces. And in this case, you can see that in this example, they're showing 6 different academic templates broken down into different content or different subtopics. Then there would be the non-academics, and then 3 and 3. So again, this would be growing and it'll be changing as we get more invested and more users get involved with the project. Sorry, stumbling on my tongue at this late part of the day. Go ahead, Jen. But if what you're seeing isn't what you're looking for, you can certainly create your custom data set. So if you have identified your area of inquiry and you know that you don't see it on the list and you want to start digging in, then you're going to create your own. So you first identify if it's an academic area, a non-academic area, or a system, and start pulling in the data pieces. So we're in this whole child data discovery. So once you've identified your area, what is it that you know right off the bat that you're going to need to look at? Go ahead, Jen. So Jen mentioned the idea that we have these pinhole reports. So what we're seeing here is that when we're talking about literacy, as an example, there's some MISchoolData reports that are available to me, and they're pulling in these pinholes so that we can establish what I would call our beginning building profile. So our historical data on state assessments, we can talk about demographics and enrollment information. We would start pulling in local data perhaps that shows us perception data related to these pieces, but we're pulling in what we are trying to create as a snapshot of the bigger picture of what we've identified as an area of inquiry. So from there, we would go to the next step and think about what areas of our process or our everyday work are touching those graphs. What is creating them? What do we already have in place to remediate that? And that's what we mean by the initial inventory. And then we would want to go through the final steps, not necessarily within the MISchoolData piece, but to finish off the discovery piece. So where is there a gap with where we are versus where we want to be? And then finally, what's the summary? So MISchoolData helps us by creating that initial building profile, our initial snapshot of the data that's available to us, so that we can continue on to start some analysis. Jen? So MICIP's second component of assessing needs is to analyze the data. So in order for us to have real solutions to what identified problems we have to get to why it's happening. So when I said a beginning building profile, that was my first perusal of my data. Now I need to go and dig a little bit deeper. And so again, this is a place where MISchoolData can help us to dig in a little bit more to why this is happening. So you have two suggested routes that you can take, either the 5 whys or a fishbone. But what we really want to do is just get beyond what the symptom is. We want to get to why it's happening. What is the root behind that? And that requires us to go in a little bit deeper to the data. Digging deeper, find another question to find an answer. The last step in any causal analysis, any root cause analysis, to actually create a growth statement. Where do we have a growth edge, or where is there something that we can address? So if we've dug deep, if we've used our data wisely, we've surfaced something that we can address. We've used our data to make a decision. And so from there, we create a challenge statement. That data becomes a path that we've traveled to find our route, but it will also be a path that we will use to find our solution in the next stage of planning. So the next time that we'll be relying on our relationship with MISchoolData in MICIP is for that SMART goal. So we've created an original beginning profile. We've dug in with our root cause. We're now identifying a solution. In order for us to measure whether we're actually solving the root cause that we've identified, we want to go back and keep an eye on the changes. In this case, that's a SMART goal, right? So that would be our indicator that what actions we're taking to address that root are actually working. So we're going to return or utilize some of those components that we utilized in the beginning with our building profile to say, now, if we've actually closing that gap, we should see the change that gap identified. Jen? So we will name our goal. We will have an end target, our long-term goal. Let's say it's three years out. We're going to use similar measures that we use to identify the problem. We're talking about student outcomes. We could be talking about enrollment information. What is it that we use to determine part of our initial work? So how are we resolving it? So our end target measure would be our end result. But in the meantime, we want to know if we're on the right road. How are we moving along? Are we actually making the changes that we'd hoped to? So now we're going to also set some interim target measures. So if my target, my end goal happens in 3 to 5 years, then maybe my interim is in 6 months or a year, depending upon the frequency of the assessment that you're using or the measure that you're using. But the new MICIP process asks us to keep an eye on our movement as we move along the change path. And then finally, the measurable goal, the final piece. It's the big picture of it. So we have a goal, we have the data that is embedded within that, and then the whole pieces together. So MICIP creates an opportunity for us to not only use data to be data decision driven, but using that data to monitor our progress as we go through the changes that we've identified. So as we said earlier, in the planning process, Jen showed you that great graphic on when you would use MISchoolData and or just data in general. And you can see that once again, in the measurable goals, we use that data because it was the data that we used to identify the issue. It should be there relevant to us when we're measuring our progress. But you can also see that later on when we talk about monitoring and evaluating. So if we want to know if what changes we have put in place are successful, some of those strategies might mention those changes around the data as well. And here's the monitoring piece. So not only are we monitoring how our students are changing in their learning outcomes, but we're monitoring how teachers are changing along with the structures we put in place for them. So our could have to do with enrollments, as Dr. Provost mentioned with CTE changes. We could talk about student outcomes with MSTEP. We could talk about student changes within attendance. All of those pieces can be part of our implementation monitoring. So at the end of the whole story, when we want to go back to monitoring the impact, this is our embedded program evaluation. So if I said I wanted to see a 10% increase in reading achievement, at this point I could say, now I have set my date for an interim. Did I meet that target measure? Simple. MICIP reminds us that when the scheduled interim date is, we can go back to that data point, do the comparison, either we're on target or we're not. In a good continuous improvement process, we would, if we were not, though, make an adjustment. Do we need to make a change? What kind of shifts do we make? How do we support our adults and our students in meeting those measures? So are we moving at that satisfactory rate to meet that? Do we need to make some adjustments either to our delivery or to the actual goal in and of itself? And lastly, in evaluate. So we've hit the end of our target. Now, are we confident? Did we support that change throughout? Do we have to extend the work and set a new end target? Or are we ready to celebrate the fact that this was successful and start identifying and set that into something that's being sustained within our systems? So that evaluate process is embedded within our new MICIP process. And again, note we're going back to the data that we helped use to identify that it's an area of challenge or where a growth edge exists. And finally, we're evaluating the goal. There's some great tools within the MICIP process, and this is one of those new ways to look at it. Think about our program evaluation tool and the diagnostic. You're going to answer similar reflective questions so that you as a team can make a data-driven decision about where the status is of your goal area, the strategies that you identified to remediate a problem area, and the activities that you put into place. So again, it's all based on data, not assumptions. And the cycle returns. So if we determine that we're not quite done, then we go back to the beginning and say, what is it that we need to do? Where is there a growth edge? We dig in, we look for a root, and we address it with the data in mind. So reimagining the data-driven dialogue. So considering the audience that we have, you are representing your colleagues, your schools. Notice that when we're talking that Dr. Jen had already mentioned that's the idea behind a data story. So how do we write the story of our schools? How do we write the story of our data? So each data point is just a data. It doesn't mean anything until we give it meaning. So we can take that data and move it into information, into knowledge, into wisdom, into intuition and insight. But we first have to give it context. By combining what we know from MISchoolData and the My Data Hub and your local data, you get context or a story that describes your continuous improvement situation or the work within your district or your school. MICIP is a heightened way in order for us to get a better picture of your current reality. So a data story is really looking at multiple data points. The 4 data types from Victoria Bernhardt, it's about telling a story, doing some analysis, and then going back and communicating as clearly and cleanly and succinctly as possible. It is a accumulation of understanding. We don't have the time necessarily for this today, but if you're one of those people who will be facilitating a conversation with your staff, this is a great video that kind of explains how data shifted. It's not a one-way communication any longer. It's not series of sets of binders that sit in the back of your office. It's a journey. And as I get one answer, I actually get a new question that I may want to pursue. And so we take this journey and we go back and forth and have conversations and we learn. So this is a great video illustrating that change. I mentioned Victoria Bernhardt and the 4 types of data. We know that achievement and demographic is the front wheel drive that this bus of education drives on. But our process and perception data is as relevant and as important as anything else that we do. And what Victoria Bernhardt teaches us is that in order to make authentic and deep lasting change, we really have to look at all 4 data types. We can't make them only isolated based on one data type or one data piece. So the best decisions are made when we can consider as many of those intersections as possible. So there are some standard or some really solid examples of data, and this graph is one that we've used in continuous improvement for a while. Interestingly enough, right now in our current situation, we have a whole bunch of data types that aren't even really on here as well, because we've never really had to consider what kind of connectivity does a student have? Like, how does a kindergartner log on to a computer? We haven't had to consider that before, but yet we have that now. So these are the beginning pieces of the conversation, and you in your current reality and you as the experts in your building, you could probably add a lot of additional pieces that are relevant to your decision making currently. So as we identify or we move into this area of inquiry, we really want to encourage you to consider all 4 of these are the data types when you're addressing academic problems as well as when you're addressing non-academic or systems. So are you looking at your process or your procedural pieces as well as your perception when you're addressing a systems issue or a non-academic issue? So how can we make this connection to you and every day? So there's a couple of examples that we have that the team has put together. The first one says, if we look at a set of data points, where can we actually find that? Because the data-driven process or the work around being data-driven takes some explicit planning. The second one is if we take a look at a problem practice specifically to your school, can you actually start to pull out what other data points would you need in order for you to address that and do an investigation into them? So exploring these. So MICIP has those data set templates that kind of help you out with that, right? So we said already, if you knew that you were looking at a curricular instruction piece, you could look at the data pieces that they had or the templates that they initiated for you. So going into that, Jen. So in this example, elementary reading scores weren't good. So if I were going to build a story, I could use one of the templates that would be related to my elementary reading. But if I wasn't, I could also start just asking with my team, what data do I know that I have? What do I have about data-wise about my students? The infrastructure, how I do business, I would consider that part of my process piece. What do I know about teachers who maybe teach the reading? What data is available about our academic pieces of the reading? But what else is there about the non-academic pieces? Where would I find that data? Is it in MISchoolData? Is it in our local warehouse? Is it in the data hub? And then what other data might we use? So we're going to ask these 4 questions, irregardless of what our problem of practice appears to be or what we are looking at as our initial dive. Likewise, if with high school, if we wanted to look at algebra, we wanted to know why our higher level students aren't prepared for higher level math. How could we build a data story to dig into that with those 4 questions that we have? Oh, and then this was this fabulous late night ad from Dr. Parker. So students are enrolled as remote learners are not actively engaged during the pandemic. That is not something that we are accustomed to diving into, but boy, do we need to know that more than ever. So why is that? Where would we go, and where would we get this information, and how many different ways would we need to with fidelity? So MISchoolData and MICIP create those pieces. It's those pinhole reports and or the different structures. So notice that on this example, we have the Victoria Bernhard Venn diagram. So in those the 6 subsystems that we mentioned, students, teachers, infrastructure, curriculum, instruction, and leadership, where might we find appropriate data to answer my reading problem? So it's easy if I go across the top, of course, I might look at MSTEP scores, but maybe I would also look at the teachers, where they were getting their professional learning. For infrastructure, what are the schedules? Notice that the different colors on this example correlate to the data types of Victoria Bernhard. Some are outcome for red. Some of those yellows are my process pieces, my green are my perception, and my blue are my demographic. And in this example, the team really pulled apart to make sure that they had a good sampling of each of the data types in each of the subsystems, because all of these pieces combined give me a thorough and deep look into why this problem might exist. And this is a similar situation with the secondary math. Again, looking at all those pieces and the remote learning. Again, diving deep, 4 data types, multiple locations. So in addition to that, we've got all those different data pieces that represent the 4 data types. Now, where will I go to get that data? Can I get that data from MISchoolData? Can I get it from my local data source, or do I need to get it from the data hub? And in many of these cases, the data is available in more than one place. So your MSTEP data would probably be available in all 3 of those places. But your local data is where you're going to have to go to get your building schedules. Teacher PD could be located in both the data hub and your local data. So not only do we need to know what it is that's going to paint my picture, we want to make sure we have good representation around your systems, and we need to know where we're going to get that data from. So one of the ways that we would encourage you to have this conversation with your colleagues is not only just to identify what your problem of practice is, but in order to identify it in a way that you can actually put fidelity to the change, is to dig in deep enough to make sure you're actually solving the root and not a symptom. And this is one of the ways that you would do it. So by identifying your problem practice, identifying some data that would be related to that, use our great Victoria Bernhard and think about your systems. How many different subsystems could touch that with those 4 data types? There we go.
Thank you, Dee. We're going to turn it over to Dr. Provost, who's going to close our session for today. Those of you that are hanging on to the broadcast, as soon as we are closed, we will field some questions. Dr. Provost?
Sorry, I wasn't unmuted. As we're closing for today, we'd like to remind you, if you need any follow-up, our regional advisory in the state is established. We have 5 different regions. Those contacts are listed along with their emails, so feel free to follow up with them if you need any additional training or resources related to today's session. I'd like to remind you that today's session is recorded and you will be receiving a follow-up email with the link. We also mentioned earlier our professional development opportunities. We have webinars between now and the end of May. And those links are here on this particular slide, as well as the next slide where it has all of them individually. So we encourage you to participate. They are 1 hour and sketchies are available. Speaking of the sketchies for today, there's a 2-step process. You must complete the link with the session attendance and fill in those categories that are required of you for the attendance. The last cell or box is to allows you to download the sketchy form. You complete that, and then you email it to our administrative assistant, Angie Cheerio, at Macomb ISD. And any questions related to the sketchies, please follow up with Angie. More information from today's session or any session that we are hosting this school year are available on the Professional Development Toolkit with the MISchoolData portal. Technical questions can be referred to the CEPI help desk by emailing them at cepi@michigan.gov. If you have questions related to the MyLogin third-party account, please visit the MyLogin help page. The link is there. Technical contact, your ISD or agency. And then, of course, for the Train the Trainer Network, today's session is on behalf of the Train the Trainer Network, Dr. Jennifer Parker at Macomb ISD or Kathy Miller at Shiawassee RESD. We'd also like to thank our partners who were very helpful in today's presentation, along with Dee, our MDE partners, Ben Brokel, Dr. Terry Nugent, and Tom Johnson, who works through KRESA with the Statewide Technology Initiative. So on behalf of our team today, we thank you for attending. And if you have any questions, please follow up on that one site. And I also wanted to mention, Dee, your slide number 94 was the video slide. And that video is only about 2 minutes, but we knew we were up against time today. But I'd highly encourage you, when you were talking about change and a journey, to view that video that's embedded. And stay safe, everyone.